Much to the shock of most people, for some reason, Disney's The Acolyte is back in the news. And I know what you're thinking. For what reason? This show that was so utterly embarrassing and flopped so ubiquitously, why would anyone be talking about it again? Well, it's because Disney is trying to do something a little bit funky, paying their Access Media to go out here and tell some conveniently half-truths to try and bring the show back from the brink of ambivalency, as the show was of course a commercial failure and, as everyone knows, nobody watched it because it was, well, aptly called shit. But lesbian Headland's most favored product isn't going to go out without a fight, as most recently Disney has come out with their Parrot Analytics, which is a fancy term for magic bullshit numbers we made up, to try to say that the show was an absolute hit because it landed well above expectations. You see, people expected the show 20.4 times more than other Disney Plus shows. But it's weird that this level of interest the Parrot Analytics is parroting, for some reason, never translated to sales. And that's because, as I mentioned, it's nothing more than bullshit. It's nothing more than a pseudo-art to try and convince you that the show was a success. And why are they doing this? Well, lesbian Headland, former personal assistant to Harvey Weinstein, and her wife, Nepo Jedi, need another job. Because nobody is looking to get a couple of burnt-out, has-been lesbians to do their acting products when these people, they can't act, they can't write, and they can't direct. They have nothing to offer anybody, and nobody cares for a rusty pair of scissors. But of course, like almost every other YouTuber on this platform, I desperately want The Acolyte to come back, mostly because, like a dumbass, I started my channel after The Acolyte came out, so I never got to celebrate and bask in the glory that was The Acolyte. I didn't get the boost of views that it brought every other channel, and unlike Heel vs. Babyface, it didn't buy me a brand new car, which is quite a shame because, well, I could really use a new car. But before going further, like, subscribe, and just like an old lesbian, let's start beating through this article. Coming from that park place, like most of the articles I read, media claims The Acolyte was a massive success using misleading data. Lesbian Headland's wife bounces to demand second season and shift blame, written by M. Montanaro. And a strange thing is happening in Hollywood media. Months after Disney quietly canceled The Acolyte, the narrative around the show being aggressively re-engineered using the misleading metric of demand. And while I wouldn't say they quietly canceled it, they certainly tried, but we made sure to make enough stink to cover it up. But recently, entertainment outlets like Collider and Screen Rant have begun publishing articles claiming the series was a misunderstood success. At the same time, the Acolyte actress Rebecca Henderson, Jedi Master Nepo, who also happens to be married to the show's creator Lesbian Headland, has taken to Instagram claiming the show was a massive hit for Disney Plus and was canceled for reasons unrelated to performance. Now, the focal reason why they're making this giant push is because of a really strong PR act they're doing. A 2025 Parrot Analytics report claims The Acolyte had 20.8 times the demand of the average US TV series. And as I've already mentioned, this is an incredibly nefarious piece of data to utilize. All focus on the idea of demand. But let's look closer. In reality, this claim of demand is a deliberate campaign to reframe a failed project. It's a last-ditch effort to rewrite the legacy of a series that under-delivered on nearly every front, financially, critically, and with audiences. Let's examine what the media isn't telling you about the misleading demand metric as it pertains to The Acolyte. Now, Parrot Analytics doesn't look at viewership or watch time or anything like that. It doesn't analyze how many times somebody clicked on it. All that it looks up is how many times somebody Googled it or a few other sources. Primarily looking at Google searches, Wikipedia activity, YouTube views, social media mentions, piracy activity, fan content engagement, but it does not engage with subscriber data, total watch time, completion rate, unique viewers, revenue impact, or churn or acquisition value for platforms like Disney Plus. In other words, all that it looks like is what's happening on the outside. It doesn't give two shakes of a wampa rat's ass what's going on Disney Plus. All it cares about is what's going on in the search engine. And assuming they're using all search engines, because it's very likely that they might even be missing demand depending on how many search engines they look at. And I find this use of Wikipedia activity to be particularly nefarious, given the fact that one of the things The Acolyte went and did was fuck up the lore of one of the characters, being Ki-Adi-Mundi, retconning his age to make him 100 years older than he actually is, which led to a lot of people who care about Star Wars but not enough to watch shitty content to go and look it up to make sure they weren't being fucked with. And yes, this did create a Wikipedia war of people looking at information online to see Keanu Mooney's age and realizing that they did fuck with it, but this means a lot more people were looking up the Acolyte, were looking up Keanu Mooney, were looking up Star Wars, and were going to the Wikipedia pages. Basically, this show was guaranteed 100% to garner more search results. But search results is nothing more than window shopping. It's going down and looking at the avenue of everything that's there and deciding that stuff's all overpriced, that stuff's shit, I don't want that worth its quality, and it's going on to the next store. Window shopping is meaningless if you don't buy anything, and that's what's happening here. These Parrot Analytics are looking at those who are getting the milk for free. And as Montanaro puts it, Parrot's data is best understood as a proxy for interest, and that interest can be positive, negative, or neutral. Parrot does not and cannot distinguish sentiment. So if the Acolyte was being widely criticized, discussed in YouTube breakdowns, trending on Reddit for controversial reasons, or reviewed in bulk, even negatively, that could still inflate its demand rating dramatically. Basically, Parrot Analytics is the old adage, any press is good press, which as we know in today's market is not true. Since almost everybody has so much excessive press, people are starting to actually weed out the good versus the bad. If someone says a show is utterly terrible and then puts out a 30-minute video per episode summarizing the episodes like Disparu does, then people aren't going to go bother the episode because they know they got the entire episode from Disparu. And that'll count for, how many views does this brew have? An ungodly large number of clicks for Parrot Analytics, but what it's not going to do is increase sales. Assuming this brew acquired his videos legally, we're going to be nice and say he does, that means Disney Plus gets one view for a couple 100,000 people watching the episode. And because of the way this system works, it is easily skewed when a controversy appears. A show generating backlash, criticism, and constant debate can perform very well in Parrot's system, despite being a failure in every other respect that actually matters to Hollywood corporate bean counters. Collider's article claims the Acolyte scored more than 20 times the average demand seen in the current streaming landscape, and framed this as a rare achievement and indicative of a sleeper hit. And they go so as far as to write that viewers can't get enough of the Acolyte. Well, we can't get enough of the Acolyte burning, being thrown on the dumpster, being cancelled. But 10 minutes of the Acolyte is enough for most people. As we know, viewership fall off was massive, as is shown down here with the actual viewership charts being placed right here as we see what the viewership looked like for every single episode. As you notice, episode 1 had a significantly larger start than episode 2, and so on and so forth, with the last episode getting barely any views whatsoever. Now, according to Luminate, which is another aggregate system, the Acolyte had 2.7 billion minutes watched in 2024. While this made it the second most watched original on Disney Plus for the year, it didn't come close to breaking into the top 10 streaming originals across platforms, let alone being 20 times more popular than the average American television show. Now, I do wish M. Montanaro would have explained how Luminate works as well so we can properly compare the metrics we're working with. From my understanding, Luminate is an app you can install on a smart TV or computer, and it simply monitors what you watch. And it does this for everyone who has it, and then it just extrapolates that data out to be assumed to be a representative sample. So if it's on 20 TVs and 15 of those TVs watch Love is Blind and 5 of them watch The Acolyte, it can pretty easily garner interest based on those numbers. Now, as I mentioned, The Acolyte brought in 2.7 billion minutes watched according to Illuminate, while also according to Illuminate, the 10th most watched original in 2024, being Netflix's Love is Blind, brought in 7.3 billion minutes. That's nearly triple The Acolyte's numbers. And that's not even bothering to get into the extreme drop-off the premiere had, with the premiere being an incredibly high position, and then even the second episode being a significant drop to where the premiere was, and every episode following subsequently. And what's even more shocking is that The Acolyte wasn't even the top of the Disney Plus list. Now, it looks like it was in second place according to this list provided, but that's not too impressive when you look at all of the numbers being counted. But what's even more shocking is that Percy Jackson and the Olympians somehow managed to position higher than The Acolyte. Don't get me wrong, the books are popular and the books were incredibly well loved, but I heard this show was really boring and the race swapping made most people avoid it like the plague. But what's really concerning is it came out the year before. Percy Jackson and the Olympians started the year before, which means that most of the series wasn't even included in this list of analytics, which means only a portion of Percy Jackson and the Olympians beat out The Acolyte in the year. And what exactly did it have to go up against? With the only thing here that had any kind of social media buzz was Star Wars The Bad Batch, and X-Men 97. Hell, The Mandalorian Season 1 somehow made it onto this list. So what you can come out and say that it was an absolute breakout because of its Parrot Analytics and how many people Googled it, that doesn't really mean jack squat when, well, we can see the viewer numbers, so it's no wonder that this show was quietly cancelled. But of course, lesbian Headland's Nepo wife has to come out here and run her big fat mouth because she's desperate for another job, since the money really hasn't been coming in as much since Harvey Weinstein went into prison. And she came out here and said that the Acolyte has been a massive hit for Disney+. Yeah, hit to its subscriber count. It was cancelled because if you know, you know, but the fans love it and we love you. We're Nepo Lesbo, I don't really know what if you know, but I'm going to assume you're saying that it was cancelled because a couple of hate mongers on YouTube, the Toxic Brood, decided to come out and insult it in droves. Well, guess what? Nobody would listen to us if there wasn't a kernel of truth to what we had to say, and if we really had that much power, do you think Kathleen Kennedy would still be in office? This message came out after the Collider article went viral and seems part of the same messaging strategy. It's an effort to push back against critics and fuel hashtags like #RenewTheAcolyte. Yes, #RenewTheAcolyte all the way, let's do it. I want that show back right now. And not just so I can thirst for Manny Jacinto, but that way I can maybe finally get monetized off of reacting to the terrible episodes. Though it is kind of interesting when you consider who's saying this. You see, it's Henderson, lesbian Headland's wife, and not Leslye Headland herself coming out and making these statements. She's only a cast member, despite the fact she is married to the showrunner. So why isn't Headland coming out and making any of these statements on her own? My guess is she simply can't, probably bound by contract or something. But it is weird that Nepo Lesbo's coming out and saying them for her, and it's leaked to Montenegro suspecting that she's running defense for her wife. There's also the fact that this show cost an ungodly large amount, $230 million, on a show that nobody watched because it wasn't good. How did you spend $230 million and make the show look cheap as fuck? So if they can try to spin this as some kind of win for them, that's really the only way to save face in front of their investors and to save Leslye Headland's career. Because who in their right mind, well, this is Hollywood, so none of them are in their right mind, so long as they've got a 6-pointed star on their chest. But who would ever realistically give Leslye Headland any kind of leeway in Hollywood when she's gone so far as to prove that she can't make a good show, especially not one with a high budget and one that was supposed to be a tentpole series? It also helps make Kathleen Kennedy look good because she's the woman who killed Star Wars, and rumor is she's on her way out, but she doesn't want to leave until she gets a win. And, well, I'm sorry, but Miss KKK can't actually do that because she's incompetent. The only way for Steven Spielberg's Coffee Girl to get any kind of win for Star Wars is if they tried to lie hard enough, and that might be what they're doing with this as well. Try and make it look like Acolyte was a win that KK led, and therefore she can leave without being disgraced. Even though the court of public opinion will say otherwise. But you know, at this point, I really do hope, I'm not being jovial, I'm not kidding, I really do hope they bring back the Acolyte to prove to us without a shadow of a doubt they've learned nothing, that they don't know how to write a good show, that they don't know how to make any kind of quality stuff with Star Wars or any other brand that they own, somehow even fucking up their girl brands like I mentioned with the release of Snow White. It's all a pile of shit, and it's so unbridled that I'd love them for nothing more to just come to terms with the consequences of their actions. How about you actually try to make something instead of forcing the companies you fund to run nothing but fluff pieces in your defense? Instead, why don't you put that money to hiring a single quality director so that you can try to rehabilitate some of the brands you have and maybe one day be profitable again. But that's pretty much all I've got. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this, and I will see you guys on the next one.